Hello and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with me, Coach Luca. I hope you've been enjoying the recent episodes and content that is being shared with you, and I love each week because I'm able to release a new episode with such a wonderful coach or individual that is able to bring so much to the podcast. There have been so many wonderful individuals that have allowed me to get to this point, and there are so many up and coming in the future. It is such a wonderful time to be listening to the podcast, but it's a great time to be part of it and deliver this to yourselves. I really appreciate everyone because there's so many stories, insights and experiences which are shared with yourselves as an audience, and how lucky you are to listen and take away this content. But I'm so lucky because I get to speak to these wonderful individuals, as well as get to listen back and take so much away, as well as questioning and thinking on the spot whilst with them, because what they relay in terms of their responses, I'd like to formulate a response upon what they portray within that moment, as well as thinking to develop what is the Reflective Coach podcast. Those true in-time and momentary reflections are so true to where we're at and how we're able to adapt and portray what is in front of us. There is so much within this week's episode with Marisa Kresge, and what she's able to offer and deliver this week is happiness and best fits, values and helping others, aspirations and communications, developing the program, competitiveness, control and raising standards, game models and key principles, questioning techniques and terminology that fits in within communications, standard setting and asking a question, is standards too high? Is there an opportunity for simplification? Looking at game day and how the change room looks, how they implement each other, how you're able to implement those that correspond with each other, implementation of tools and balancing, the opportunity to reflect on subjectiveness and bringing subjectiveness into play that really helps correspond what they do in terms of their culture, their program, their environment, those players, how they can support them, how they adapt, how they continue to change, fit in a game model, the preferences, key questions. There is so much within this episode to really take away, such as the change of environment, expectations, culture and structure, meeting expectations, pride factors, intentional ownership processes, how those environments are created, those own pathways for players upon the programs and the coaches supporting that, where she currently is as a coach, self-perception, energy and interactions. My gosh, there is so much within this episode. Marisa is well recognised amongst the coaching community and is such a big name amongst the American coaches and pathways that it was so wonderful and grateful to have her on. I'm so grateful to every coach and individual who comes on the podcast, because they are so wonderful in terms of what they're able to bring, but how they offer so much and have these open and honest conversations which are inspiring, supporting, understanding and reflecting upon all times, which is great because it gives you even more as an audience to take away and reflect upon. But I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. There is so much content within this. I hope you continue to add to your journal, add to your notes and continue to add to your reflections, and hopefully these reflection points allow you to continue to adapt and take much within your game, which is a fantastic route forward. Now, I'm Anthony_Luca. The podcast is at TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It is a Reflective Coach podcast everywhere else. Every like, every follow, every comment and subscribe that you leave and give really does help the podcast grow and helps continue to share wonderful content and these great individuals who are part of the podcast with a wider community, and I hope that it continues to build. You can really help by leaving those subscribe, those follows, those comments and those likes upon Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn and Twitter. You can also find the podcast on Podcast Addict and Flickr, as well as TikTok and other social medias. But the core is YouTube, Anchor, Twitter and LinkedIn. So every time you drop that like, drop that follow and drop that subscribe, it really does help the podcast. Now, I hope you enjoy this week's episode with Marisa. As said, there is so much within this episode, and it was such a wonderful episode, and I had such a great time talking to her. Now, this is me, Anthony_Luca96, Coach Luca on the Reflective Coach podcast. Don't forget to drop that like, drop that follow, drop that subscribe, and leave the comment. It really does help the podcast. Continue to take away, continue to learn, reflect, move forward. Listen to this episode 2 or 3 times. It's a wonderful episode. I hope to see you all soon. Coach Luca.
Awesome.
All right, perfect. Cool. This is true adaptability at its finest, kicking off the coaching world. So,
I love it.
That's absolutely likewise. So, how's your day been so far?
It's been good. Just got back from two girls' youth soccer national events, so I was on the road recruiting for 10 days and now back at home, which is nice.
Always nice to be back home and sort of get back in the normal swing of things. But it's great to be on the road and break away and see players in a different environment and to see the wide pool that might be available and the players that you might recruit, which is exciting.
It is. It is. It's always good to get out and see, especially we'll recruit a lot in the Midwest, see how they compare to outside the Midwest, see what teams there are, see the competition level and a variety in players.
And when it comes down to those recruiting events, then obviously there's a lot of other coaches and high schools there looking at players, and there's a huge showcases a lot of players on talent, and you want to try and tap into the players who might fit your program, but you have a lot of competition from everyone else who's there. So when it comes down to say approaching that player and trying to make them an offer or trying to attract them to you, is it sort of how you get in first, or do you wait and see how others approach them, or is it putting so many on the table? How does that work for yourselves?
For us, the way that I do it, I try to build a relationship to them. So initially, after I see them play, I'll reach out to them, either text message, email, whatever contact information I have on them. I'll say, hey, just watch you play, give them a little bit of feedback, give them one or two things I really liked that they brought to the game, and then tell them, love to follow up with you and learn more about what you're looking for and share a little bit about Illinois State, which is where I work as well. So it's more just about them initially to try to get them on the phone, to learn about what they like, who they are as a person, and then start to give them little tidbits about what we can offer, how it fits into how they see their future career shaping up.
And when it comes down to obviously that recruiting, then obviously if you went to a different organisation or a different platform that allows you to recruit players and maybe negotiate with them and create offers, around what could be offered in terms of resources or what might be attractive to them. But whilst you're at high school, you're offering what the program is, the academic course, the quality of living in the area, the quality of the high school, quality of the teaching, the experience, and so on. And whilst the recruiting is in that, and compared to where it might be somewhere else, whilst you're a recruiter yourself, would you prefer to stay doing high school recruitment or being in a place where maybe you might negotiate more and have resources to offer with players? Is that something which you'd have a preference over, for example?
I think one of the most important things for me when looking at either different jobs, things like that, what we can offer student athletes, what we can offer players to come in, what experience they'll get is huge. Obviously, we have the academic side of the equation being at a college and a university. So what the school has to offer in terms of majors and programs and rankings, cost of attendance, the town that the school's in. Those are all factors that I'll consider when looking at outside jobs. Just because if I can find a recruiting niche and I know exactly what type of student athlete I'm going to be able to bring the players into our environment, what environment I'm able to create for them, I think now you have a pathway towards success. It's when you don't see exactly how you're going to recruit student athletes, what your niche is going to be. I think it becomes a lot more challenging. So those are all factors that I will consider when looking at different opportunities, different locations, different schools, of how I would be able to recruit those players to that place.
Of course, and it comes down to that identity, that connection, that authenticity which comes into it, because whilst you might be at another organisation or have the resources at your disposal, when it comes down to it then, sometimes you may be taking that authenticity away, as as we see in the professional world, and it's different when it comes back down to high school, grassroots and so on. The abundance of resources which are offered and taken away from what the authenticity of maybe that buy into the club or the organisation or the buy into the culture and the values, because they see what they're getting out of it. But for high school, it is that authenticity, as you say, and looking what not only the town can offer, but the academic programme and the bigger picture. And that's the exciting thing of working with, high school individuals and young people whilst trying to get them on the programmes.
Exactly. Yes. Completely agree. I think that's the fun part of the job, to build those relationships and just kind of explore, well, this is what we have. How does it fit? Maybe it's not a good fit. That's something I talk to all our players about in this recruiting process, that every school is not going to be a good fit for you. You might like some aspects of it, but at the end of the day, are you truly going to be happy? Are you going to develop in that environment? And I think those are the most important things as players are going through their search process.
And I completely agree there. I think that's important to say because, the grass isn't always greener when it comes down to it. The opportunity might not always be the best one. And I know from experience I've been in that situation. And I was presented with 2 job offers in the same week. And luckily I had the weekend to think it. But I was also unlucky because I overthought and literally led myself down to following maybe what was in my mind rather than what was in my heart. And I took the job opportunity and it wasn't the best job opportunity for me. And it wasn't the one that I wanted. And I ended up there for quite a few months. And whilst I was there, I just didn't take to it. I just didn't enjoy it. So it wasn't the best fit for me, and maybe as a result, I wasn't the best fit for them as well. But I think that's important when it comes to players because there's so many different opportunities out there. There's so many different high schools, so many different clubs, for example, and there is a lot of opportunities, which is great. But making sure you have that best fit, and the same for us as coaches. You have to look at what is going to make you happy, what's going to allow you to have those enjoyable moments. How can you look back with fondness if you're going to leave and move on, and those relationships and everything else that comes into it. But again, it comes back to that authenticity. But I think that's a great point around what best fit is and really identifying the opportunities and appraising them and working out, do you know what, this may be a great high school, it may be a great program, it may be great coaches, but you know what, it actually might not be the best fit for me at this time, and that's all right. And sometimes being honest with ourselves is a key point, and it's hard for young people around that, but being honest and finding what works for us, I think is really important.
I completely agree. And I think that's the fun part of our jobs, right? Developing those relationships and figuring it out and meeting different people along the way and just never burning those bridges, maintaining those relationships, even if it doesn't work out, because you never know when it's going to come back around and you're going to have a transfer or different job opportunity and it might work out in the future. How are you remembered the first time? How did you treat people? I think those are all key parts of having that authenticity in those relationships with people as you go through it.
Of course, and although the coaching world and the sporting world is, massive and there's so many, different individuals coming through and the expansion of it is huge, it is a small world on the opposite flip as well because, there are so many people which I've ended up working with or coming across it in terms of education, coaching and just being within those worlds that are interlinked. You never know when you're going to come across someone again or end up working with them, and maintaining those bridges, as you say, and not burning them, just keeping them open, it just helps along the way in personal and professional life for the long term as well. And if I could go back to my younger self, I think that would be a key message which I'd give to myself is don't burn those bridges, and the world is a small world because you never know who you're going to come across again.
Exactly.
And I remember watching Claire Balding, and she had Chris Eubank Senior on, and she had Harry Redknapp, and Chris Eubank gave some elusive quote, whilst Harry Redknapp's was simple, was be nice to the people on the way up because you never know who you're going to meet on the way back down, and that's resonated with me ever since.
I like that. I really like that quote. That holds a lot of value and is very, very true.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to value then, obviously we have our expectations, we maybe have non-negotiables, we may have standards, we may have a particular way of working, we may develop a philosophy, and obviously the school has a culture and its own values which it maintains. But whilst it comes down to, being that individual and who you are as a coach, what values do you hold towards yourself that you would take into any role or any coaching environment?
My personal values, first one would be authenticity. So when you said it, I was like, okay. That's the first one. I am who I am. I want to enjoy the people I work with. I don't want to put on a show. You're going to get what you're going to get. Sometimes it's a fit for people. Sometimes it isn't. And I think just staying true to who you are will help you along the way, even if some people, it's not the best fit for them. So definitely authenticity is my first value. Loyalty is my second. When I have people around me, I want to keep the good people close. I want to help others. I really value the relationships that I build with people. And the last one is I'm determined. I'm very competitive. I want to be successful. However, I define success may look different to me versus some other people. But I'm determined to find a way to be successful, to bring other people into it, to help them develop their own version of success. So those would be my 3 values that I really hold close to me. And I pride myself on representing and being every single day.
I love those values, and I think they're great values, and I'm glad that we could have touched upon them before, asking them straight out right, and finding success. And I think again that's another key point is success looks different to everyone else and how they may perceive it and maybe what they want from it. So we might go right. The success is that you're gonna have a scholarship opportunity for this and maybe go abroad. But the success for a young person was like, do you know what? I made 10 friends. I've got great playing experiences. I've had a great coaching time. I've grown technically. I've built my confidence, and I've got the opportunity to maybe carry on with sport. I might go off and do coaching, or I might not do anything in the sports world, but I might carry that in good stead. So that importance of what success looks like to every person can be so important, but it can also help build that environment and that culture. And I think it's great because as you have new players coming in and building up that program and that regeneration essentially over that period of time, whilst these players come in, just sitting with them or just having a chat with them, what does success look like for you? What successes are you defining for the year? How would you like to look back upon the year, and how are we going to start that off? I think they're great components about how every coach can work with a player, but that works well, and I think it's good for your players as well as yourself. But being in that position where you can help harness those young people and build on success and help them form and frame what success is, I think that's brilliant in terms of that coaching approach.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and one of the key things that I found out is obviously success looks different to everybody, but how you go about and understanding other people's motivations for what their success is. If you understand people's motivations, now you can help them be more successful. If you have no idea, well, it's a lot harder to help me or have me help you with what your goals are, what you want to do. And same thing for your teammates. I think if your teammates know what your end goal is, what you're looking for, now when they communicate with you or when they have those relationships with you, it's a lot easier because you know something about them. I think when people don't know others' motivations or what they want from the experience, that's when interpersonal conflicts start to come about because we're not on the same page. So I think the more clear we are with the communication, the more clear we are with what our individual aspirations are for success, but also the collective team goals and aspirations for success are really key in finding that balance between the two.
And I think that's great, and they're absolutely key points. And I think that aspiration and the communication around that really helps them build those values, build that environment, and build that team connection. And whilst internally you're very competitive and have that competitive edge to you, you're working in an environment and platform whereby you're helping develop and harness the growth of young players and people. So whilst you're in that environment, and the coaching world may lead you to somewhere else, or you never know what might spring up. But whilst you're working with a lot of development and being on the development focused program, do you think that one day you would find maybe your absolute inside calling from that innate competitiveness by working on a really competitive program?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something as I go through it, trying to figure out what the next step looks like. What does it look next? Obviously, like I said, authenticity is one of my values. And I think finding a way for me to understand the level that we're at right now, where my players are at, what it looks like at this level, isn't exactly where I came from. So I have to adapt and adjust a little bit in order to put them in the best positions and give them the best chance to be successful and help them grow. So looking to get into a little bit of the next level, maybe a professional level, is definitely something I aspire to do. I am very interested in it. But right now, it's more about developing this program and finding ways to be successful within it, even if it isn't quite at the same demanding or competitiveness that the next level looks like.
And I love that, and I think that's great to understand, currently where we're at, where we'd like to go, and how that motivation may look for us as coaches, as well as, that platform and springboard. And whilst working with some players, and certainly in this youth aspect and that development program, football is a competitive sport anyway, and everything is about winning in football. And whilst there's a lot of opportunities and maybe a focused objectives to develop these players, sometimes we become so focused on that player development and those opportunities, we sometimes forget about that competitive edge and that competitive nature. And sometimes I reflect on last year, I'm like, maybe I wasn't competitive enough in the way that I led the team, and I had that high expectations. I wanted them to push each other. I wanted them to set their own standards, whereby I didn't set so much pressure on them. But it's maybe that sense of did I not set enough about competitive edge and competitive winning? Because that's what maybe some of the players were lacking in that transition last year from the team that they were in to the team they were going to, and with me taking over, they really lacked that competitive edge, that kill off of a game, that relentlessness, maybe that instinct. So I think whilst working with youth players, we mustn't forget that competitive edge must be maintained, and there's a great opportunity to really harness on it whilst within those development programs.
Exactly. I think finding that balance, and finding the common ground of, okay, what does it look like? How hard are you pushing them? How much do you not allow things to slide, but how much do you change your standard a little bit, so that they can be successful? And the balance, I think, is key. Not catering too much to changing, but also holding them to that higher standard where they are improving, they are being challenged, they are being pushed on a daily basis in order to become more successful. And that might not be in the first couple of games, it might be later on towards the end of the year or towards the end of the season, but having that environment where they are challenged, I think only makes for better players and better program long term.
Absolutely, and I think that's a key consideration. There's so much to take out of that, and over a course of a season or a course of a program, and you might appraise a point, or you might be reflecting, or you might be approaching something, or you might find yourself during a period of time. But is there any point at a season you might find yourself going, we need to become more competitive here, or I need to have a more competitive approach or stance?
Yes, for sure. And I think that's the hard part, because I came in and I am so competitive, and finding the balance of, well, how do you drive competition? How do you inspire people to become more competitive, to raise the level, when you can only control so much within your environment? How do you get people to take that next step when they don't necessarily know what it looks like? I think that has been a really big challenge of mine since taking over the program, just because it's a different situation than I've been in before. And with my personality being the way that it is, and their personality being a little bit different, it's finding that balance of, okay, how do I get them to, how can I create an environment in which they're thriving, in which they're becoming more competitive, in which they're raising the level on their own. But I have to teach them, and I have to structure it in a way that can get them there, that help with those small steps to progress towards that.
And I think those little steps are key, because sometimes you might have players coming into a program, or we might have those expectations or those objectives, and we might want to accelerate players quicker than the time frame, or we might want to accelerate them quick anyway in terms of how we may approach, how we may direct and deliver, etc. But those little steps are absolutely important, because sometimes we might have a timid player coming in, or they don't have that resilience or that relentlessness, and they may be lacking in these areas. So therefore these little steps are going to help in their development as they progress and further move on through that program. And sometimes, again, just realising what the best fit is and realising little steps work, and that progress is all made. And whilst we are in a competitive world, which is difficult, because it is all about that progression and how quickly maybe can we do it, or how can we help a player accelerate to get through to a first team program, or get that scholarship, or professional club, or semi-pro. There's a whole array of players that we work with, that you work with, whereby, again, they're on that journey, so therefore those little steps are absolutely critical, and we mustn't forget every player that fits part of our team or program, or how we can support them either.
Exactly. I agree with that.
And I think that's great. And so you're on the back end of your season now, you're approaching pre-season, is that right?
That is correct. So we, players are off, they're back on campus, they're training with their strength and conditioning coach, but as a coaching staff, we can't have any access to them. So we'll start here at the end of July. So one more month, and then we're kicking off our preseason.
And I think that's great to hear. And, whilst you're planning that pre-season or pre-season kicking off, and they may be doing that strength and conditioning and preparing themselves physically and in terms of those fitness levels, how would you typically, plan your pre-season to set your team up whilst upon that return, and how that may look?
Biggest thing for me is creating a periodization plan throughout the entire year. So while the fall is our predominant season, for us, we do have a spring season. So going through creating training blocks, having different training cycles that we'll go through, I'll start doing that. I've been working on that this entire past month. So structuring our days, giving them an off day. What does it look like? Do we train for 3 days in a row, give an off day? What are the types of sessions are we doing? So is it more of an aerobic and endurance session, so it's a little bit longer? Higher numbers? Is it more of a speed day for us, more sprinting, more high intensity distance with middle-sized games? Is it more of a small-sided competitive day? And really finding the balance between the physical aspects of the demands of the game in those training sessions, and then also balancing the tactical side. Okay, well, if today's an attacking day, maybe tomorrow will be a transition to defend day. So we can re-emphasize the attacking principles we just worked on. But you know what? Now we lost the ball. What's our reaction look like? How do we get back? So finding the balance physically and also tactically within our plan is something I spend a lot of time on doing to try to create the best environment for our players to be successful. So we don't do too much of one topic tactically, or we don't do too much of one physical day in order to put the players in a situation where they could become injured or not perform at their best level.
And I think, there's a lot on offer there, and there's so much consideration. I like that training cycle and how that may look, and especially over a course of the season as well, and having that big picture in mind. And, whilst, you might have those training cycles, and as you say, look at transition or that attacking element, whilst we all have our own philosophies, our way of coaching, our way of thinking, over, a season, we're working with players, and there's so much which they have to learn, and as you say, coach and teach them. And there's so many areas which they may be lacking that soccer intelligence and game understanding, and really getting into the tactical detail of it. So whilst you have that philosophy, over the course of the season, do you make sure that defending principles, attacking principles, those transitional, and all the other elements that may come into it are covered, or do you tend to have a heavier focus on your philosophy and how that may look?
So I go based off principles. I have a philosophy that translates within our style of play and what our game model looks like. But every training session will always emphasize 2 to 3 key principles for us. They'll really help the players not only understand positionally, okay, this is what we're looking for from a number 9 or an 11 or a 7. So they'll have an individual principle, and then we'll have a line principle. So this is what we want the forwards to do when we're in the attacking third. And depending on what third we're training in and what the overall system is, because our starting positions will be different, but our principles won't change. We'll just reemphasize those and really hone in so that the players know, okay, this is my role, this is my responsibility, this is what we value as a team, this is the team tactical intention for the day. And we'll develop sessions from there. And then it's more about teaching players within the decision making. Okay, who has the ball? Where's the defender? Where's the opponent? Where's the space? And where are your teammates? And we'll make decisions based off of those 4 cues, but always highlighting our principles that will go within our style of play.
And what are your principles then within your game model?
Biggest thing for me is I want to be effective when we play. So that's my overall philosophy. So when we're in possession, can we break lines of pressure? Do we have the right body orientation? Do we play to a lead pass if there's space there? How can we be most effective at getting numbers forward and creating goal scoring opportunities? On the flip side of that is stopping transition. There's a lot of transition in the U.S. So does our shape and possession allow us to defend right away if we were to lose the ball? Are we in a good spot to help prevent the opponent from turning and facing forward? So we'll talk a lot about our shape and our spacing between our lines. And then defensively, we want to be very organized and compact and hard to break down. So looking at that, we'll win back possession a lot through either double teams or interceptions, depending on whether we win it in a moment of transition or if we're able to drop back and get into one of our mid blocks and kind of sit and intercept those passes. But transition to attack, again, it's all about being effective. How can we go forward? How can we break lines? How can we do it in a way that presents itself within the game situation? So if there's a high back line, that's where the space is. We'll play balls behind. If they're sitting in a low block, space is not behind. Okay, how can we move the ball in order to pull the opponent out to then exploit the space they just vacated? So we'll talk a lot about that, but it's all about small details for me and which make players successful. So is your body orientation facing forward, or does it face backwards? Facing backwards, it's a lot harder to go forward and see what's around you. Can you take those 2 steps backward to readjust? Can you play the ball to the proper foot? Can you play the proper weighted pass? Those things over time within a game, I think really allow players to be more successful and create more chances and opportunities for you.
And I think that's a great game model, and the principles interlink really well. And it sounds great in terms of what you're doing. It gives plenty of opportunity to players, and it gives them a lot of problem solving and critical analysis in terms of how they think and can approach the game. Because we can coach, we can set up, we can deliver. We're on the side. We can give them objectives. We can give them instructions before the game. But whilst they're on the pitch and they may be in those situations, and they may look at transitions, or may look how we can get in behind, or how you're getting in behind, and how you may break lines, how you create attacking opportunities. But problem solving for them and being on the pitch to analyse the situation themselves and be more reactive as well as proactive in terms of thinking 2-3 steps ahead, or they're finding those little spaces to drop into and finding that weakness, I think is key in terms of how they can approach the game and really improve that game intelligence, whereby then if the game model changes or they have to go fit into another one, or the framework might change, it's going to allow them to fit into it rather than having to be so overcoached or being reliant on the coaching or the instructions, which allows them then to perform or extract themselves to a certain level, attain to the coaching degree that has been given to them over the course of the years.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll have a lot of conversations with our players so they all know, they'll continuously hear. I think communication and language is one of the most important aspects of coaching. If your language and your communication is consistent, now the players can know exactly what to expect. They know what moment of the game we're in, what principles we value, what we want to see. And so I think within that, it's now we'll film a lot of training sessions and games so that when we watch it, okay, hey, what did you see here? What did you think? Because if they can start to read the information and read the cues and start to share how they made their decision, now I can help them be more successful. When I don't know why they made a decision or why they chose to do X, Y, or Z, it's a lot harder for me because, as you know, soccer is not black and white. Constantly changing. There's different factors. There's different trends depending on who you're playing. Things happen within the flow of a game like that. So how can we teach them to become a little bit more aware to read those situations and read those cues, and then apply the right principles within how we want to play is a huge part of how I coach and how I interact with our players so that they can try to get the best, so they can learn the information and best apply it based on the situations that they see, and choose those decisions.
And I think that's great, and choosing their own decisions and how they can see the game is really important. And again, it comes down to that perspective, because we might want to react or we might want to pro-react because we can see something from the sidelines. We've been able to see that build-up play and that opportunity that might have arisen before the player has, and and what the opposition are doing. And sometimes we're on the side and we can criticise or maybe start shouting at a player or try to get a lot of coaching instructions across. But realistically, if they got that split-second edge where the ball's come in, they've quickly been pressed, they got a short space and a short amount of time, and they're only doing what they can literally see in front of them, or that reaction only upon watching film or that review or sitting down and having time to reflect will really allow them to then look back and go, do you know what, I actually could have done this in that build-up play. And it's just about that process. But I think the key point there is not to have too many expectations on players straight away, because they can only see what's in front of them, and they can only do it in a time frame and space as well as the player around them. And sometimes, they're just going to do what comes into their head first. And but again, that comes back down to that game intelligence, how you create that critical thinking and allow them to create those thinking process spaces, and how they can frame that whilst being on and being prepared, etc.
Exactly, and I think one of the main things you just mentioned, we're setting those expectations too high. What I always tell my players is, you set the standard for me. Wherever you show me that you're at, I'll coach you to that level and a little bit above. But you show me what you're capable of doing, and I'm going to hold you there, because you showed me that you can do this. So that's your new standard. It's not where I set the standard, it's what you're capable of. And I'll challenge you within it, but that's the level of consistency that I expect from you. And so that's another thing that sometimes players are like, well, your standard's too high. Nope, you showed me that that's where you're at. That's what you can do. You did it within a match. You did it within a training session. Now that's the expectation moving forward. How do we get you to become more consistent? How do we help you make those decisions? Because you already showed us that you can do it.
And I think when it comes down to it then, when it comes down to that consistency and showing a player, you might have a lot on film, which I know high schools are big on in America from the coaches I've spoken to, and maybe what they focus on. But will you do a lot of data analysis whereby, you're critically analysing a player, or you're looking back upon their performance and going, right, this player's a centre mid, I want them to have the objective of creating X amount of passes, X amount of breaking lines, an amount of recoveries whilst holding position in this pitch geography. Would you then sort of track that in terms of that detail, as you said, which you like, and looking at, right, they've completed, say, 6 out of 18, and they've only had 4 recoveries, and then look at that over a period of time, and then give yourself that basis to really then set that standard and look at that consistency and prove a point? Or is that too detail orientated and taken away from what could be just seen on film in a simpler form and just those continuous conversations?
We'll find a mix and a balance between the two. We do have access to a platform called Y Scout, so it does break down our games and give us statistical data within different thirds, within different phases of the game for each individual player, which is really nice. So the players have access to it to see their own clips, to see their own game reports. Now, will we present that as a coaching staff all the time? No, it's too overwhelming for people. So I think you have to pick and choose what data is important to you and implement it at the right time. I think if you do it too much, it becomes just background noise and it's not as effective tool for learning as it could be. So definitely finding the balance between everything we want to do is objective. So there's no subjectivity to it. Okay, we need to connect more passes. How in depth we go into it will depend on the individual player and where our program's at with that particular team in that season, depending on what they need to be successful. So really managing the individual relationships, knowing the individuals on the team, and then knowing where the team's at as a whole dictates a lot of how we present the information, what information we show. Right now we're going through team meetings and we're trying to come up with just 2 key performance indicators that we want to be really good at this fall and build our identity around. So when you look at us, these 2 key performance indicators are showing up consistently. They're going to be what makes us successful. Could there be 8, 9, 10? Sure. But for right now, with where we're at, we want to be good at 2. And so then when we're looking at data this fall, we're talking about why players are playing or what we need from their role, what they need to get a little bit better at in order to prove their situation. Those 2 things we can fall back on and say, okay, this is who we are as a team. This is what we need from you. This is what it looks like. And for different players, it'll look like different things because you can go in a little bit more depth with somebody who's further along. Some people, they're not there yet. So you have to take a step back and you have to simplify it. And I think meeting players where they're at is how you get the best out of them. And it goes back to having those relationships to know the person, know what their strengths are, know how they need to be communicated with, know what they need in those moments from you.
And whilst, that identity might change over a period of time because players might not be at that level, or you got players to a high level, and then the team dynamics might change, or the way you play might just be slightly different to what it was last year, or, you've progressed over that period of time and different squads have looked different. And whilst there is that identity which relates to us as coaches and the way the teams may look, and that identity of the team may look different, that association with us, over a period of time, is there, How do you thrive off having, those different identities of those teams connecting with how your overall identity and philosophy may look over that period of time to the outset then?
I think it's really about structuring and guiding the conversation. So you stay within your principles, you stay within your style of play. One year we might be a pressing team. One year we might be a mid-block team where we have to sit because we don't have those player qualities in order to be able to press in as many moments as we like. So how do we adapt? How do we change? But I think really highlighting your principles and having the players know what your principles are, and then coming up with those KPIs that fit within the framework of your game model within the references are really important to us. So structuring the conversations, again, that communication, having those standards set. This is what we value. Now, giving them the freedom to come up with those KPIs within what the framework is that you've already set is really important. And then they come up with something not quite within it. Okay, how do we restructure it? How do we ask them questions? Hey, so you said this. Tell me how this fits within how we want to play. If we're in possession and you're saying this is what you want the KPI to be, okay, shots on goal, for example. Sure, we all want shots on goal. But are you just going to start taking random shots from, say, 30 yards out? Well, 1 on goal, so check. but that doesn't really fit within the game model. So really being specific and intentional with how we communicate with what we want to develop is the most important part, and how you structure and guide that conversation. It's the fun part, because you never know what they're going to come up with or say. So then it's really being aware and having those conversations, and being pretty open about it with what we want to do, what our team goals are, what our team intentions are tactically within those principles, and going from there.
And I think that's good to understand how players may approach that differently and how they may understand that differently. But I think that's a great point about how that game model may fit the different preferences, and how that may look over in terms of the year to year, and how the clientele. So even though you're true to your principles, those principles are set in stone per year, and you're slightly changing it in whereby you're adapting to the players which are in front of you, because we might be too a stickler by having that game philosophy, that model, and we're going to be like, right, every year these players come in and that model's going to fit these set of players, and I'm not going to change much about it, and therefore you're limiting your success realistically, and you're limiting the success for your players, as well as the opportunity to grow and expand your own coaching skill set, because you're like, right, this is my philosophy, this is how it looks, and this is how I'm going to deliver it. So I think that's great in terms of what you're saying, having a set structure of principles and delivering that, and how that comes across in terms of communication, but making sure it fits the preferences and the clientele year after year, to really benefit your players. And I think that's an excellent point, whereby stay true, but also make sure it fits the players and clientele, because unless you have that, then the success may not be as defined as we'd liked, or it may be limited. But I think I absolutely love that point which you've made.
Exactly, and I think I personally believe, I think that's where a lot of coaches have lost sight of why they coach. I think it's about making individuals successful. Yes, you're within a team sport, but without the individual being successful, your team is only going to be so successful. So how do you cater? How do you create the environments in which individuals can learn and they can thrive? And I think that knowing that you have to be flexible sometimes, because you can't just, we're not an EPL team. You can't just buy and sell players. You can't just buy the player that you want to fit your game model and get them in right away. It takes a lot of time. So how do you maximize the individuals in your environment in order to be successful is something that I really spend a lot of time on, because I think if I can make the individual successful, now the collective team will get there as well. But without the individual, the collective team isn't going to have that success to the degree that I think.
Of course, and I think that's a key point there. And you can't just buy and sell players, so you do have the players who are in front of you. So by working with them and making sure that even though they may be lacking in that technical area or that skill set which we may want, or to the standards, they're still there in front of us. They're still part of that program. And some coaches are not lucky because they have to work on a grassroots program, or they have that high school program, so they don't have those EPL resources in terms of that luck, how I mean that. But working with those players in front of us is important, how we utilize those players and make sure those opportunities are given. But it's understanding who's in front of us and why they're in front of us, what those motivations are, how we create those buy-ins, how can we create that anchoring effect whereby they create that good team dynamic, and there's so much which really goes into it, and how we can support and work with the players. And obviously there's a lot which you're doing in terms of the high school, what you're doing in terms of that head coach role, the program, and I think there's a lot of successes which you are having, and it's great to hear how you're shaping that success and how that fits part of the program, but how you work with the players as well. So there's a lot of key elements coming out, and I think it's great to understand both you as well as what the program is and how that works then hand in hand.
Exactly. And I think that's the fun part about coaching. It's the enjoyable part. How do you make it work? Every year is going to present a different situation. How do you make the most of it? How do you create those environments and those relationships?
Absolutely. And earlier on in the conversation, you spoke about developing the program, which interlinks with what you just said then. So whilst you may have an outlook, say, for this year, but then maybe next year and so on, and you might have that short to long term thinking and then that strategy and big picture, how are you developing a program, and how would you like to develop that program then?
Biggest thing for me is establishing our identity and our game model on the field, and really having those principles be able to cater to a variety of different players. So we set the standard, their objective. We know what we want to do within the 4 moments of the game and on set pieces. On the field, really build that identity, so that next year we're not at ground zero again. We already laid the foundation this past year. Okay, now how do we enhance it a little bit more? How do we integrate the freshmen right away to get that game understanding, to understand, hey, this is the expectation, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to play, this is who we are as a program, and build from there. I think you can find more success if you don't really have a game model or stick true to your identity, just because it can change so often. And you can maybe able to get more results that way, but I don't think that builds success long term, and that's something that I'm really looking to do within the program is build the foundation so that each class who comes in elevates the program a little bit more. We get a little bit more sophisticated year after year, which we can always fall back on and say, okay, this is who we are. You know what we're going to be coming into it. You know what the expectation is, the standards are, how we want to play. If you change constantly, you might have more success, but I don't know if that success is able to be sustained long term.
And I think that's a key question then, is how can that success be sustained long term? But if you have too much change, how can it be sustained or not sustained? And I think that's key because, you know, there's a lot of conversations that goes around adaptability, growing with the game, those continuous changes and how we change with the game ourselves. But sometimes staying true to ourselves and sometimes staying true to those principles and that philosophy, not over changing and inheriting too much can really help us in terms of benefiting. Because I was having a great conversation the other day, and it ended up being more about adaptive coaching and sort of how that coaching progress has allowed them to grow as a coach in their philosophy. And whilst we got talking, we were like, right, I've pinched a bit from here, a bit from there, a bit from there, a bit from there. And I was like, that's great, and you've taken bits from this, and you may be building upon this philosophy and so on. But when it really comes down to it, I was like, I'm not really understanding or sure what your true identity is, because you spoke about this, you spoke about that, and I'm relating to this, and I'm relating to that, but I'm not really relating to what you are. So there was so much change and inheritance of so many different ideas and programs and coaching principles. As much as they might refine it into a philosophy long term and how that may look, and that's good, they're at a point where I might say this is more of a development sort of phase for them, and they're going to get to the refinement phase before they're on that peer delivery phase, because you know, there's so much which they're interlinking and taking, and having so much change isn't really creating that true identity. So again, where you said about identity and what you want to do for the program, and how that change is sustained over time, I think is such a key point in response to how that was presented the other day.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the communication and the standards. Just really establishing those values and those principles. You're going to have to change. Soccer's not black and white like we spoke about earlier, but I think the more the players know the standard and they know what's expected of them and they know how we want to play, then that's when they have the foundation, they have understanding. Now we can start to make changes and more adjustments based on the opponent or based on the current situation of players or injuries or weather conditions, whatever it might be, that we need to change. But if you don't have that, I think it's really hard because now the players are in a constant state of unknown. They don't know what's expected of them. They don't know how to read the game. They don't know what our true identity is. So it's a lot harder when they make decisions because it's an unknown quantity to them.
And I love that state of unknown and that unknown quantity. And I think they're two key points and great to pick you up on, because when it comes down to it, and a question which I was going to ask you, and which leads into nicely actually, if their players are going into unknown and they have quite a lot of anxiety levels, maybe that's stress, they may be not understanding how they're going to prepare themselves, they may move away from the expectations we may have, and without setting these standards in this principle, sometimes we're seeing players come into the changing rooms or that match day environment, and we're expecting them to do certain things, but again, that's where the key of that communication, as you keep saying, it is absolutely key. But we may be looking at it going, right, this isn't actually how I want it to look, but this is, and you may want to push it to those higher levels. But when it comes down to it then, as you said, you know, how does match day environment look for you? How do you expect the players to come in? How would you like them to come in? And maybe how is match day managed for yourself and the program then?
I think that's a great point, because the environment that I came from and my new environment, I assumed a lot of, hey, this is just standard. This is what it looks like. This is what they're going to know what it looks like. They don't know. When you change environments, they don't know. So the most simplistic little task that you expect from them, you have to tell them. Otherwise, you set an expectation, you think they're going to do it. Well, now you're disappointed, but you never set the standard. So I think expectations sometimes are unclear because it's more subjective. It's how you feel. It's what you expect somebody else to do. But did you ever set that standard? So I went back and once I realized, okay, we need to set the standard. We need to make it very objective for them. Say, this is what we expect. This is what it looks like. So now they have those reference points. Now they have the framework to say, okay, this is what I do on a match day. We will do a walkthrough. We'll walk through our game plan. We'll go over key ideas for what we want to see within the match. We'll ask players questions. We'll do the shape out on the field. We'll do a meal together before the game, when they show up, what time they should be going to see our athletic trainer to get treatment. Those are all things that we had to set and give them specific times for because they just didn't know. And it wasn't something that was done previously. So really being clear with that communication and really outlining the day and what the day looked like and what tasks they have to do was something that we needed to be more structured, just because it was different for them. And they do it, but now they know. So now you can hold them to that standard. When they don't know, it's a lot harder because it's just, you expect something and they just don't have any idea. So finding the common ground of, okay, hey, this is what we want it to look like. This is what we want you to do. We want you to come to the facility at 11. We'll be in our training gear. We'll walk through it. We'll do some shape afterwards. Okay, you're off on your own. Come back at 3 for pregame meal. Okay, match is going to be at 7 o'clock at night. You'll have to be back at the facility at 4 to get treatment. So what you do in between then is on you. But really outlining it and being intentional with how you structure the day is really important so that the players know so that they can implement it. And there's no disappointment or unmet expectations.
And I love that, and I think that's good because those unmet expectations, they can be hard then because we may not have communicated that through, and we may have those expectations, as I said, but players are coming in, and therefore we're trying to hold them to the standards, but then we're not using that objectivity to really hold them then because we haven't set that precedent through the communication which we've had. So I think that's something which, as you were talking about, I was reflecting on how my match room and match day looked like for my squad, and I might have had these expectations whereby I've always done it with the teams I've had and the expectations have been really high on what I've wanted to see from them, and sometimes I'm sitting back looking, all right, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, but I want them to do this, and yes, as part of the coaching process and learning there was a lot of transition in it, but I think the other point was then, as you said there, because they weren't doing it previously with the other coach or etc., we automatically had that assumption, or there may have been an assumption that these players, and thinking of coaches who may be listening now, they may have an assumption about these players where they're at and maybe having higher levels, but they may have never done it before. So by setting in new precedents and communicating across what we want and how that may look, moving away from that state of unknown and those unknown quantities, I think is really important to really have in terms of the consideration, but really then detailing in how the match day environment looks. So I want you to walk in by giving handshakes. I then want you to sit in these certain seats under these numbers. So therefore I might have defenders together, fielders and strikers. I may want my goalkeeper coach to go out and then do this and then come back in. So there's a lot which comes in down to it in terms of those match day and those procedures that we may have. But I think by really communicating it and detailing it, and sometimes we may go too detail orientated, but I think when it comes down to match day and those expectations, really getting down into it is really important.
I agree. I think that's the most important, and communicating them, because then once the players know, okay, you can hold them to that standard, they'll be able to implement them because they've been clearly laid out. I think one of the hardest ones that I'm still trying to adjust to is the energy. Okay, what do the interactions between players look like? Staff, what happens if you lose a game? How do the players respond? Right now, there's been, the program hasn't had success in a few years, so there's a little bit of a lack of ownership or a lack of pride. So it's, how do you teach the players to get to create the environment you want to be a part of, right? Recreate your culture. So how do you teach them, hey, when we lose, you're a part of this. Like, how can we bounce back? How can we get to the next thing? Not, oh, well, we just move on and kind of wipe the slate clean. It's almost like having an emotional connection to the school that you play for and having that pride factor that I'm trying to go through right now and really teach them what that looks like, because they just don't know, because there's a disassociation or a disconnect between the two. So really having that pride and the love for the program, and really having interactions and energy and just the way that you present yourself and you interact with others in the match day environment during the game, after the game, and what that looks like has been something that I'm going to try to be way more intentional with this year, because that's something that I assumed was, hey, after a loss, everybody's going to be disappointed. Well, when you come into a program that's only losing for the last several years, maybe that's not quite the same of how they approach a loss, and that's something that I was taken back by, and something that I have to be way more intentional with, not just the small details of, okay, this is where your bags go, this is how we're going to walk out to the field, this is when we're going to arrive. Those small details, it's now going to be about, okay, how do we create more buy-in, create more intentionality within the program with that ownership, that it is on the players, that they are a part of the process. They are the ones who win and lose the games. So how do we create that environment as our next step moving forward?
And I think there's, again, those key questions of how we do it and making sure those players are involved, being intentional about how you do it, those pride factors, those ownerships, those processes, and that overall process, how that may look. I think they're all key considerations and key elements which you're including in ensuring that successful program. And again, once you instill these and create that, automatically you're creating those success levels without setting a success level as such. So whilst you're doing that and the players are on that themselves and they're going through it, they're going to have a lot of success from it upon that journey as well. So, it's great in terms of what you're doing in the program, how you're moving, and, there's certainly a lot in terms of how that may play in and how that may look next year, which is great, because then you get to have that real reflective journey of, what did last year look like, how did this year look like, and what improvements we made. And again, that's all about how we move forward as coaches, move that program forward, and how we may increase these environments or improve the environments whereby once these players come in, they're having a lot of success themselves. But I think what you're doing is really great, and by that accountability and holding everyone true to their standards and trying to increase those details, those expectations, those processes, match day environment, how that may look. I think it's a fantastic program and fantastic journey for yourself, which you're currently on, and what you're doing and instilling within the program.
Well, thank you very much. As you know, it's a task. It changes every year. Different obstacles present itself. So see what we can do with this upcoming year and learn and grow from it, and try to create that belief and buy-in and keep the players exciting. So it should be a fun season for us, a fun upcoming year. Looking forward to it.
And I think so as well, because, once you're looking forward to it, then those energy levels extend then to the players, because they're going to start looking forward to it as well. And they're going to, want to be part of it. And that's the natural buy-in, because unless we certainly believe in it ourselves, unless we have that buy-in, and unless we're putting those energy levels in, the players are certainly going to notice it. And therefore, if they're not buying into it, then the whole dynamic changes, and then, the situation may change, or it may not be the levels which we're expecting, because we haven't set the precedent, as we've said. So setting the precedent and having those energy levels and ensuring that we got the expectations which we're delivering across, therefore that's going to help the players give that level of that buy-in as well, and those expectations. So if we've got high intensity, then they're going to have high intensity too as a result of it.
Yep, and that's something that our staff this year is going to be very intentional about, with the way that we interact, the way that we show up, the way that we live out our values, and set the standards for the players so that they want to be a part of it as well. So should be a fun season, challenging season, but we'll see how it goes.
And I hope, you have that success. But I absolutely love those points and what you're saying about being intentional, because, we might be getting things across. We might be working as coaches. We might be doing particular things, or we might have, a certain way of doing things. But when it comes down to it, being intentional is absolutely key in terms of how we deliver, how we set up, and being there. And given that, so that's such a key point which I'm going to take away. And I think a lot of coaches, whilst there's a lot to deliver, or they may take a lot of ideas away, I think once you refine it and actually simplify and not be over too complicated, being intentional, being authentic, as you said, and staying true to those values, I think it's going to offer so much to everyone that's around it, both to yourself as a coach, your coaching team, and the players.
Yeah, and that's the goal ultimately, right? So that's hopefully what we're able to create out of it. People can take something away from it, and it might look different to every person, but that's the fun part of coaching and being in the environment and sharing information and sharing what we do, and hopefully inspiring others. Hey, you can take this, you can do this. It's going to look different, but finding your own way and your own path, I think, is key.
And I love that, because finding our own way and own path is absolutely key, because, sometimes you can have so many, different explorations, or so many people give us advice, or this is out there, that's out there, and suddenly our mind becomes fuddled because there's so much actually in there and we're over-analysing it. But when it comes down to your coaching journey and you're currently where you're at, and say you were back starting out, and when you commenced this coaching journey, did you set yourself an objective in terms of where you wanted to go, or what you wanted to get at by the end of your coaching career? Did you set that objective as you started, or did you go along that own path and seeing where you're currently going?
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, I have an overall objective. I have overall idea of where I want to go. Now, just like my players, it depends on where I'm at my career. It depends on how I define success, how I redefine success. Because as you change throughout a coach and you change throughout life, it's going to change. It's going to look different. So I think just having an overall idea and then being okay with it's not going how I initially thought, or you know what, I'm more happy going in this direction now, whereas I initially intended to go here, but that's not what I want. So redefining those success levels, and really being open and true to yourself within the whole process, and not just trying to follow a particular path because you're dead set on it. I think that's where people creates a lot of unhappiness, and it creates a lot of unmet expectations, and puts unintended pressures on yourself. So having that overall plan, I think, is amazing. That's what I need. That's what I want within my structure, but also being okay with this is where I'm at. This is my new goal. This is my new intention. And being okay with rifting a little bit in order to create that success.
And again, I think there's an absolute key component there, and something which I'm taking away, unintended pressures. And that comes down to it because, we might take on so many different things. We might be spinning plates, as they say, or we might be overanalyzing a situation, or we might be overthinking, or there's so much playing within our mind. But realistically, they are unintended pressures. So last week, I went to a live podcast event, and all I could think about was school the next day and the teaching which I had to do. And I had, a more challenging lesson to deliver compared to the week before because of the clientele. And I knew the clientele very well. I worked with them, and I wasn't too dysregulated because of it. But it was just playing on my mind more than I would have for usual. And I think that just come down to how I was thinking about how the dynamics were going to work, how I wanted the outcomes to be achieved, or how they were going to be presented, how the time was going to play out, how it would transition, and there's a lot which played into it. So whilst I was at this live event, my mind was literally wandering and thinking about this, and it was only until after the next day was completed and I looked back and going, do you know what, I overthought about that, and the day was much better than I expected it to go. So therefore, those unintended pressures which I was putting on myself just by maybe having that anxiety, or maybe overthinking or overanalyzing the night before, took away from the actual moment that I was supposed to be in, and what I was supposed to be sort of analysing and taking away and having those outcomes. I was preventing myself because of this obstacle which was being placed in front of me because of my own thinking pattern and the pressures that I was putting on myself. So once you take away those unintended pressures, you refine and you create that space to reframe situations and how you might approach it. It's actually going to be beneficial towards what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Exactly. self-aware and self-perception of everything that goes into it. Yes, we all want to be successful. Yes, we want things to go smooth and we want to have plan A, B, and C. But just being aware of the energy that you're giving off and the interactions that you have because of those unintended pressures, I think the more aware you are of it, the more you're able to overcome them or redirect in a proper way rather than having to always look back and then reflect. I think that's kind of step one. And now step two, can I catch myself within the moment? And that's something I'm trying to be more intentional about, especially moving into this season. How do I interact? What is my tone? What's my body language? Just being aware of it more within the moment rather than reflecting, did I handle that situation right? Why did I react the way that I did? Just taking a step back before responding and kind of thinking about the things that go into it and being able to adjust as you notice those small changes that may arise because of those pressures that you're under.
And I think that's important there because as much as it is about reflection and, you know, time passes by, and a great quote from the live event that I went to last week was, once that hour has been lived, that hour is dead forever. And therefore we might be moving along through life, we might have a lot of reflections and we might get to a lot of points, but once that time has passed and we've moved on past those points, and we might spend then a lot of time reflecting. We might refine ourselves at a later age or a later point, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we're always continuously adapting and continuously learning. But being aware of it in the moment is absolutely key. And I think I've got to a stage now where I've reflected so much, and as you say, that body language, that communication, I take into so much consideration when I do something. And sometimes, you know, I may have conversations with people, or I may just observe how they interact or how they may deliver something, and I'm like, this person has no awareness of the way their body language or what they're saying or how that may be perceived. And sometimes I can think of one person in particular, and I might have just cringed at that moment because they had no awareness within that moment. But I've got to a point where I'm aware, like, right, maybe just slow down, maybe just stop, maybe just think about this in different ways. So I think that's such a key point of being aware in the moment, to be able to adjust to those changes once we notice them. So I think that's absolutely key, and I love that because we spend a lot of time about reflection and so on, but I think being aware of it in the moment, in just slowing down and going, right, in our own heads, is going to be more beneficial.
Yep. I completely agree. And that's a daily practice. That's something you have to be very intentional about. And the more you practice it, the more you do reflect and you do kind of give yourself cues or teach yourself strategies to take a break within whatever situation you may be in. Situation might be going fine, but take a minute to pause and say, okay, how am I reacting? What is it like right now to be either coached by me, be in this conversation with me, just to kind of reshape, okay, I'm on the right track, or, you know what, I don't know if I like the way I just responded to that right now. How do I change moving forward? And really coming up with some of those key strategies to stop yourself within moments is something that I think takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, but something I am definitely trying to be more intentional about moving forward, because I think the best people, not just coaches or managers, are able to do that.
And I think that's great because it is absolutely true, because sometimes you may see people or coaches or anyone that we may work with or even see, for instance, they may say something, they may not even think about it again, or they've just gone out and delivered it and they've moved on and past it. But what they may have said may really resonate or stick with a player or a person for a long period of time. And sometimes we may flip back to periods in our lives and be like, why do I have this 30-second clip ingrained in my mind? And it's because of just something that may have happened and something that lives with us. And, you know, the person who may have said it or may have not intended it or may have intended it, they may be cracking on with their day and, you know, moving on and never thinking about that moment again. But we're resonating with that moment and it's still living with us, and we're still having, you know, memory captures of it. And it may not have any real true significance, but sometimes it might just play out for us. So I think that's absolutely key, because that awareness, I think, is intentional. I think it's a daily habit, how you develop that mindset, instilling those good habits and really refining what we do. I think it's absolutely key there, because, you know, sometimes we move on and sometimes we don't try to refine ourselves, but refining ourselves is absolutely key in terms of that. But I think that, without asking what does reflection mean to you, I think you've summed it up naturally just by working out the way you're thinking, how you approach things, and then, as you said, creating those strategies. So you've already alluded to it and said how you're going to do it next year, and I think, you know, you've demonstrated what reflection is, which is great, especially for the purpose of the podcast, without truly asking the question.
I'm glad I could allude enough to it to make it clear. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing, and that's the fun part about it, because how I go about it, what I take away from you, what I take away from this conversation, and how I approach things moving forward, I think that really sets people up for success. If you're able to take one or two tidbits and implement it, maybe the way I implement something looks a little bit different. But as long as I'm able to get to the end goal of being more self-aware, being more reflective within moments, and being able to impact the people around me in a positive way, I think that that's ultimately the end goal and the key to all of this.
Absolutely. And whilst, we're touching upon reflection in our times, what do you think your biggest challenge so far has been as a coach?
Definitely the transition as a assistant coach to a head coach, and what the interpersonal dynamics in the relationship look like between the players. Just because of previous situations that happened within the program prior to me coming in, with the head coach and player dynamic, and then now with me going from an assistant coach to a head coach, having a different dynamic and having to restructure those relationships, and what they look like, because at the end of the day, I am the one making the decision of whether players play or not. As the assistant, I always gave input, but it was never my decision at the end of the day. That wasn't my area of control. So now knowing what the players think, that they're a little bit more hesitant to come to me with things, because I am that person in charge, has definitely been something that I'm trying to rework and find what it looks like for me, and find what it looks like for my players, because what it looks like for me is going to be different than a different head coach, maybe in a similar situation, just because of the way that I build relationships, the way that I interact with players and people around me. So that's definitely one of the toughest transitions, but it's an ongoing process.
I love it, and I think it's great because naturally I was going to say, did you always know that you wanted to be a head coach? But all throughout this conversation, I think it's come across as, yes, naturally you have, because of the way that you're thinking about it, the way that you're approaching it. You might have been on so many different training courses, you might have done all the studies, you might have read all the books, for example. But the way that you're naturally coming across and saying, how would I do this? Or asking the key questions, or reflecting, or we're going to instill this next year, or being intentional, I think just shows how much of a natural leader that you are. And getting to that point as a head coach, I think, was always going to happen anyway. But being that head coach isn't easy. It's more accountable. There's a lot more that goes with it. There's a lot more stress levels, or we might be committing a lot more time, or sometimes you may take away from the grass and doing the operational elements a little bit more. But whilst you're moved from that assistant coach to head coach, is that something that you naturally wanted to do, though? Or is it something which has been presented to you and now you've stepped into?
No, I've always wanted to do it. It was something that I've been planning for, something that while I was assistant, I would take away things that I liked or things that I didn't like, kind of reflect on, well, this is how I would handle the situation versus this. I wonder why they handled it in this way, asking a lot of questions, and trying to really take in all the information that I could within my specific environment, and then outside environments of doing courses, having other mentors, and building relationships with outside people. Just to be best prepared, that when I do go in it, I had a plan. I was aware of the direction and the foundation I wanted to lay for the program, and how we were going to get there, was something that I spent a lot of time doing. And I wasn't going to take the next step to become a head coach unless I felt like I was prepared and had that plan, and had more of a framework to how I would approach things and interact and really build the program from the ground up.
And whilst we've had whilst you've had that big challenge, and whilst we're on a coaching journey, we can hit what may be low points, for example. And low points are something that are not naturally planned. They may be something which happens to us unintentionally, and they may sit and resonate with us relating to that earlier point. But whilst you've had maybe a low point, or maybe the biggest challenge, or other little challenges which you may not have spoken about there, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, and a lot of the thought process, and again, those unintended pressures which come into it. But what strategy did you have, or strategies did you have, to sort of manage your emotions and come out positive and go, right, I can start, and maybe go again, or I can move on past this situation, or I still want to be coaching in 5 years, so is this really going to have a significant impact on this? The answer is no. So how can I move on past this? So therefore, what sort of strategies have you deployed, and getting away from maybe dipping into those negative emotions or slipping even further down the ladder in terms of that?
I think really the way that I have to look at it, the players and how I'm asking them to play and our identity. I knew going in and taking this job, they weren't going to be able to implement it as often as I would like. They just don't have the technical execution at that level, which is okay. But that didn't mean that I was not going to implement our identity. I was going to restructure what it looked like. So looking at some of those statistics that we could track, like how many passes did we complete, how many forward passes did we complete, or how many were in the negative direction or backwards towards the goalkeeper, how many were lateral. Coming up with some of those key performance indicators that when we watch the match back and we could reflect on, okay, this is what it looked like. These are little wins. We might not have won in the result, but finding ways to say, hey, we're getting better. This is something we worked on in training this week. We wanted to force the ball central and win the ball back through interception, and we created 2 chances out of it. Did it result in a goal? No, but this is something that we tried to do in training that you implemented within the game. So really being intentional with those little wins and presenting them to the players to keep them bought in, and keep them seeing success has been one of the biggest things that's hard for me, because at the end of the day, I want to win games. I want to have those results, but we're not there yet. So how do we get closer towards getting the actual results that matter? And that's really coming through with how we want to play and finding ways to win within those moments, within our principles and within our game model.
And I think that's great, and I think you've got a great approach, and certainly what you've done there. And again, those key questions are absolutely critical. And I think for any coach or any professional listening or individual, if they just listen throughout this and write down a full list of questions, I think they've got a fantastic coaching portfolio to go away with and really implement within their coaching delivery and to utilise on. But I think those questions which you're asking are absolutely key, because whilst we're delivering, we can be setting out so much and giving out so much information and those objectives and relaying so much, but we're not actually asking questions. And asking questions can really help problem solve in certain ways. It can highlight areas that may need development. It creates those key conversations, and sometimes by asking those conversations, we're creating more learning than by going, right, this is the set task for learning, and then these are the outcomes. And sometimes those questions can really lead to a great debate or a great conversation or great learning outcomes. But I think those questioning, which you've been doing a lot of and really bringing into play, I think is absolutely essential when working with players and trying to find out more from them. And that's something which I'm keen on, and something which I want to continue to develop and take away in my own delivery. But I think what you're doing, is fantastic in terms of how that comes across. And you've learned a lot, you've done a lot. As you said, you've been on those courses, you were preparing, learned a lot as an assistant coach. But what has been the biggest lesson so far that you have learned as a coach?
That no matter what, at the end of the day, relationships, if you don't have a relationship with somebody, doesn't matter what information you have or what you know about the game, people are only going to buy into you and the vision and the program that you want to create if you have those relationships. So I think being intentional about spending time, getting to know people, and really putting an emphasis on that in order to get the soccer part and the performance on the field that you want, you have to start with the people first.
And I think that's brilliant, and that's a fantastic quote, and such a fantastic quote to really take away and finish on that episode, because there's so much within that, and there's so much which I've taken away from you, and now I've been noting as you've been speaking, because there has been so much which I've really wanted to delve into, and so much which I've wanted to pull out, and I think it's going to be great. And I'm already thinking ahead of how that can be utilised in different ways. But it's been great to tap into your soccer mind, what you're doing, where you're going, how that may look next year, and for the season ahead. But it's been fantastic to sort of speak to you and get into that, and how that has come across. But I really appreciate your time, Marisa, and it's been great to understand your program, what you're doing with your players, how this is working, how next year's going to look, your own reflection style, everything that you're implementing, your game model, the frameworks, your questioning techniques, how this may play out with players, and just having multiple hats on, from podcaster to coach to a manager to maybe an analyst in my own head. I'm dipping into all these different hats essentially, but I think there's so much which you can really take away from it and think about it on the flip side of everything you said, because that's how you truly learn, and I think creates that overall big picture. But I think it's great, and there's so many different outcomes and takeaways from this which I know that I've certainly noted down and certainly are going to be great for other coaches to learn. And as I said about that learning platform, I think there's going to be so much within this which they're really going to take away.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's always interesting because you kind of reflect and you take away. Okay, well, what do I do? Why do I do this? And so I think just having this conversation with you has also helped me. It's helped make me more aware of, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is where I'm going. This is what we want to do as a program. So I really enjoyed it. So thank you again for reaching out and for your time.
No worries. Well, I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for your time as well. And as I said, there is so much within this that I've taken away, and it's been great to speak to you. I'm glad that we could get this organised, and you know, you're still earlier on in your day, but I hope you have such a great day and a great weekend ahead. But honestly, the time is truly appreciated, and it's a big thank you from me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day as well.
Thank you very much.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.